we're back. It's another edition of the Orange Bloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Geoff Ketchum. That is Anwar Richardson. We're talking Tuesday's practice for Texas. Day 4 of Texas spring ball for the Longhorns. The Longhorns are back after 2 days off. Chance to rejuvenate coming off of a Saturday practice that was their third in a week. The pads were on. Anwar, your instant reactions to what you were able to see with your own eyeballs, any developments, and then obviously you had a chance after practice to talk to Steve Sarkisian and kind of get an update on just the general vibe of where they are and where things stand.
Well, I'll start with the easiest one first, which is, we'll start in a quarterback situation. I think that's going to take some time, and it's going to be a little bit of a work in progress just to make sure you get the timing down. I think, Quinn's really good on the short balls, sails a little bit on the long balls, but again, you've got to give a guy who's only been on campus and working with guys for a few months a little bit of time. And one of the things that Sarkisian, he brought that up even after practice. And, he just said, like, that's to be expected, at this point in camp. And he expects that to improve as time, goes along. So he's not necessarily worried about it, but he does, point towards like a little bit of the inconsistencies that are there, but knowing that it will get better. Isaiah Nair is a guy that looks really good, catch, big, strong, fast. He definitely pops when he's out there. I really like honestly, when you see Jordan Whittington, Xavier Worthy, Isaiah Nair, I'm going to throw a fourth guy in there, Marcus Washington. I feel good when I see those guys out there. I feel very good about like the possibilities of those guys. I mean, they're fast. Jordan Whittington catches so strong. I mean, that guy, he's strong, he's big and fast. I mean, you look at him, you're like, man, dude, you could be a running back. Like that's how big you look. I can see why he
almost looks like he could do whatever he wanted to do.
Pretty much, like anything. Like, I mean, if you said put him at that edge rusher position, I think he'd be all right. I'd just be quite honest with you. So I thought overall he was good. For me, another guy that pops, Jahdae Barron at the DB position. Smooth. Like that's the word I look. Catch is interesting. I did this video this week with Serenity, and we were talking about like speed, and we're kind of talking about football speed and track speed and kind of how all that translates, right? And when she talked about sometimes the best thing you can want to see is guys who make it look effortless. And when guys are running, you said a lot of times, she sees the wildness, but when you see the guys who glide, and like he's like a glider. Like every time I see Jahdae out there, it's like he's in position, but it looks like he could have moonwalked to get there. Like it's just fascinating on how good that he is. So those are kind of some of the things that struck me a little bit on both sides of the ball. The defenders, honestly, they were so far away, so far down the field. Catch, it was a little bit hard, and sometimes those guys were probably like 200 yards away from us, so it was a little bit hard to get that as an impression. I gotta get one more thing though, Catch, that caught me very interesting. I got there really early because I live so far away. So like, where you live in Cedar Park, you got to make a choice. You're either going to be early or late. But the one thing you don't want to be is sitting in that damn traffic on 183 and on 35. So I'm just like, I'd rather be early than late. So I'm there early. And I get there about 7. Probably supposed to start about 8 o'clock. Around like 7:15, I'm outside the car, just chilling. It's a beautiful morning out. I see Gary Patterson just walking by to the field, says hello. First guy there is Gary Patterson. I'm like, his reputation as the first guy in the office, last guy to leave is beyond true. Like I saw it from my own eyes. So that was just another random thing, but I'll just throw that in there as well.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but the Patterson thing is interesting to me because if I was a coach on that staff, I don't like being second personally. Mm. So as I'm just surprised that guys are letting the new guy beat them out to the practice field. It is unofficially a statement made every time it's made. And, it's Gary Patterson getting some territory proclaimed. Like, I'm here first. I'm about that work. I'm about that action. And I think that, watching Patterson's role, I just think throughout the spring and going into this season is going to be really, really interesting because he does not shrink. And that's what, you know what I mean? Like we talked about, this is a dude who's been a head coach for 20 plus years, and all he knows how to do is be a big personality. And he's had to be that. It still feels like you're getting Gary Patterson. And that's got to be a bit unusual for him to be that guy, but not technically an on the field guy, but not necessarily acting like a guy who's not on the field. It can only make this team better. They can't get worse. And there's still a lot of want to in Gary Patterson. And it comes out every day when you're like, hey, just for the record, Gary Patterson, first guy out on the practice field. That's a hell of a thing for a guy who just got fired and, has done this thing for so long that he could do, you know who I am? And it doesn't seem like there's a lot of that in his repertoire, which, I wonder how I'll be. Yeah, no, he only looks good every time we talk about Gary Patterson so far. And if this is any kind of reclamation job to like what he's about so that he tries to go out and get another head coaching job. I mean, nobody on this staff, I can't tell you anybody who I think is working more than Gary Patterson. He's at all of the events, takes all of the pictures. He's first out at practice, first to arrive. I got nothing but good things to say so far about Gary Patterson. Consequently, and I'm going to throw it back to you with this. It's funny, before we started recording, about 20 minutes before, and I had seen the comments that Sarkisian had made, the highlights on social media and things like that. But you sent me the audio, so I started listening to it. And it was interesting that very early on, he went out of his way to say, today we weren't at our best. And he specifically said that they had to poke and prod the players to kind of get them through the practice. I thought that was a little interesting, given that this is only day 4 and that they've had almost 70 hours between practices. They practice early on Saturday. So they mostly had Saturday off, all of Sunday and Monday off, and they get back to work on Tuesday. And that they needed, in Sarkisian's words, poking and prodding. That's a baby red flag. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. Thursday, they might have the best practice that they've ever had. And maybe he'll make a point later in practice to say, that second Tuesday, it wasn't like a great vibe automatically, but like, man, all I had to do was do it once. And it's been great. A lot of things can happen that will make this somewhat insignificant, but I can't act like my ears didn't do the German Shepherd thing that my new dog does all the time. Whenever that dog hears something that is remotely interesting, its ears pop up. And I felt like my ears kind of popped up a little bit, like just not a big thing, but a curious thing that this team that has so much to prove needed some poking and prodding given the circumstances.
It's fascinating to a certain degree because, Ketch, when you think about, you've had a bunch of winter conditioning that's out there. You've had, like you said, the practices that have started, and this is a team that, let's just be honest, everybody should be fired up. There's should be anybody from top to bottom, from head coach to janitor, that sees this thing and says, man, we just got to go through the motions. Like that shouldn't happen with a 5-win team. And I think maybe that's a little bit what Sarkisian is getting at. Like you want hunger. It shouldn't be, man, we had to push them, we had to motivate them, we had to get them going. It makes you question several things. And again, this is not overreaction Monday, but we're just having a conversation. And again, it's March and end of March. But he's like, it's early in the morning. And I was like, yeah, it's early in the morning, but it was beautiful outside. Like the weather was Catch, it was like 68 degrees, 69. It was like perfect kind of weather.
It's Southern California weather is what it was.
I mean, it's the best. I mean, it was an overcast, so you didn't have to worry about the sun beating down on you. Like, it was perfect. So it's interesting. I mean, we'll see how it continues to progress, but it's one of those that take a mental note on that. And the other thing too, if I'm Sarkisian and I'm saying to myself, man, these guys really need to be pumped and motivated. At that point, I need to have a conversation with my coaches because, as the head goes, so goes the body. Leadership starts from the top. So at some point, you've got to look and say, okay, I know it's the players, we need to do this, but what are we as coaches doing to make sure they understand, like, this is the expectations and this is what I want from you every single practice, day in and day out. You would think heading into year 2, because it's very interesting, Ketch. I feel like now that we're talking, I feel like one of the things he said last week was that the guys understood the expectations now more so than they did in year 1. So it's then very interesting, like the following week, when you said they understood the expectations, now it's like, yeah, well, maybe they didn't. So it's interesting.
Last thing, like I said, we don't want to turn it. This doesn't need to be an hour-long video on us breaking down a practice that, quite frankly, we didn't see very much of. You got to see the beginning of it, but like the meat of the practice that he's talking about, media wasn't allowed to see. We're only going by on his words. This isn't a call for overreaction. This is just a call to remember this team is 4 practices removed from being 5-7, and they didn't get to 5-7 by accident. You get to 5-7 for a number of reasons, and you don't probably learn everything that you need. And there's no probably about it. You don't get 4 practices into the spring and it's all fixed.
Yeah.
And I think it's the thing that we're going to constantly talk about with this team is it's really hard to know exactly what the ceiling is for this team, because they're really at the baby steps phase of these proceedings. Interesting again, yes, that it took some, in Sark's words, poking and prodding. Those are not my words. I literally heard him say it 5 minutes before we recorded. And, I think that when you talk about, he'll go to his coaches and say, hey, maybe there's something else we've got to do to make sure that this team, every couple of hours, 3 times a week, that we get them in this capacity is mentally ready. And I think, again, they're still learning how to be better than 5-7. And today is probably, it's not a bad thing. These things are good, I think, because like you said, Sark gets to, it wasn't in the middle. He knows we had to do this. And so he'll be able to go to his coaches today and say, well, that can't happen on Thursday. So what are we doing that we make sure that whatever happens an hour into Thursday's practice, the jumper cables don't have to come out? Probably better that this kind of issue happens this early and they can potentially address it so that it's not repetitive. But look, I guarantee you the next time that we meet as media with Sarkisian, poked and prodded for effort almost certainly won't come out of his mouth. It'll be, we learned from this. And I think that'll probably be one of the messages in a week from now, is that they didn't let one kind of practice turn into something that was more problematic. Because again, and I think Sark will probably remind them, hey, I thought you guys knew the expectations and what it took and what was needed. And here I am, I'm going to remind you. And if you got to be poked and prodded on day 5 to bring your A game, then I'm going to put the younger guy or the newer guy or the guy behind you. Like, jobs can be lost because you ain't ready to be here. So I think in the end, this will probably end up being a positive thing. Anything else from today really stick out?
I did ask him a little bit about the tight end. I was trying to look and see if I can find it. They have it exactly. But, first of all, Jatavian, Catch, every time when I see that young man, I describe it, he has an NFL physique. Like he looks like a guy that shouldn't be in college right now.
He
right?
looks like a first off the bus guy. You can send that guy out and the other team goes, oh, okay.
Yes, yeah. He's the guy you send out and they're like, oh, this is what y'all doing today? Like,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if we're about that life. He makes you kind of, think of it. But the two names that he brought up was Gunnar Helm and Jatavian Sanders. And I found that to be, very interesting. He had said, but he liked, both of those guys. And really like what he was seeing from them. I'm just kind of going through my notes. He liked what he saw them, receivers. He described them as being natural route runners, and saying that he thought they were actually more comfortable in the blocking area than some people give him credit for. He still likes Jaleel Billingsley, the transfer from Alabama. He's described Jaleel as just a guy who's a lot more physical than people give him credit for, but he described him as a physical, tight end. But he seemed to be really, like I said, the names that came out first, were Gunnar, Jatavian, and then of course he praised, Jaleel. So it could be more of the phrasing of the question more so than him leaning somewhere. I think he kind of answered it in order. So I think that's kind of it. And then he also mentioned another guy that he said was doing really good catch. I want to make sure I get young man's name right. Patrick. Oh, poor guy. Shit. B-A-Y. He pronounced it correctly. And I feel it's B-A-Y-O-U-T-H. Patrick, I'm so sorry for butchering your last name, but I will make sure I get it right the next time. I just don't want to say it incorrectly. But mention him as a guy who also has looked good in the tight end room.
I think I have two reactions to that. Neither have to do with that horrible non-attempt at
the horrible non-attempt / really bad airtime of me not.
No, it's okay. I got two reactions that have nothing to do with that. Number one, Sanders, like, awesome, right? Like, he looks good. A year ago, he had such a quiet. You see that guy in pads and you see his reputation. It's hard to believe that, like, he just didn't really get any run last year. That there wasn't even a couple of plays where we looked out and went, holy cow, yes, they got this guy. Like, you wouldn't have even known. And so to hear him kind of 4 days in as one of the, hey, this guy is looking good. He never brought up Jatavian Sanders' name ever last year. He never said in the middle of a random game week, like, hey, I know that he's not playing, but boy, you guys should see. It had this feeling of like, God, is he not as good as we thought he was going to be? And it seems like this spring, he's right where he needs to be. And that's what you want from your 5 stars. You want them 12 months in. Do they look like they're where they're supposed to be? And I think we're starting to see that with Sanders. My other reaction is Gunnar Helm is really good. And this time last year, Helm was the early enrollee as a true freshman and was looking really good. He was a name that was being mentioned in the spring. And then his season kind of came apart because he got banged up and never quite was able to sustain the consistency healthy that he had in the spring when he was a bit of a buzzword. I think Gunnar Helm is very quietly one of the 5, if we were doing a video, top 5 guys that Longhorn fans are sleeping on and probably shouldn't be. I think Gunnar Helm absolutely makes my top 5 based on he was being talked about like this last year, and then it just kind of slid away. I think Barron would also be one of those guys that makes my top 5 because when he started to play more last year, very quietly in the middle of the season, he looked like a guy that was just getting some snaps. And at times I wondered whether or not he should have even been on the field. And then it was like, okay, well, now I'm no longer thinking that. Now it looks like he belongs. but it still looks like he's just getting some snaps. By the end of the year, you could put him on one, or if you were to make a list of best defensive backs on the team right now, by the end of last year, Barron was in that consideration. And while that's not lofty praise, it's an incredible transformation over the course of about 6 or 7 weeks. And that transformation hasn't started. And I think what we may be seeing in Barron is that's a future NFL guy. This is going to be a guy that starts and plays a lot of games. And we'll look back and say, oh, we remember the beginning. And we watched in real time as he emerged. And now it just feels like he's a starter. And it doesn't feel like his name gets brought up enough when we talk about who the best players on this defense are. But I feel like by September and October, we will stop overlooking the progress that this guy's made at DB.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So Ketch, I've got one more thing to talk about from practice today. And there's actually after practice, but here's my question to you, Ketch. I want to know how you feel, because this can go for another 10 or 15 minutes. Do you want to do one more video? One more? No. You want to record one more? No? What's the difference?
I don't know.
If we talk about it for 10
or
15
minutes. Well, you think this other thing is worth another video?
Yes.
All right. Well, people, leave your comments in the comments section. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. And if you've seen this video, we got something coming for you. Yes. So for myself and Anwar Richardson, thank you for watching. There will be more. Just give us like an hour or two. And if you're watching this video on Thursday, some Tuesday stuff, the end of this video lets you know, go find this other video. I don't even know what it is.
It's going to be recruiting related. And the reason why I want to do another one is because I want to lean on Ketch's expertise, but I want him to take his time. So that's why, trust me, you're going to love it.
Lord knows if he's leaning into my expertise, it can't be done in 3 minutes. We will see you soon.
I know this, man.
Later.